Welcome back, class 10, your civics class. Continuing with chapter 3, the Union Executive, the Prime Minister, the Union Cabinet, and the Council of Ministers. So, before continuing, let me recap 3 categories of ministers from the last class. We learned that there are cabinet ministers or members of the cabinet. Then ministers of state and deputy ministers. Okay, we all remember that cabinet ministers hold important portfolios, means important offices like Home Ministry, Defense Ministry, Finance Ministry, External Affairs and Railway Ministry, External Affairs Ministry and Railway Ministry, and things like that. Only cabinet ministers have a right to attend meetings of the cabinet. They together determine the policy and programs of the government. I'm just doing a recap. Then comes the ministers of state. They are not members of the cabinet. They may or may not be given an independent charge of ministry. They do not participate in the cabinet meetings, but they may be invited to attend meetings when matters concerning the departments are being discussed. Then comes deputy ministers. They are junior ministers and are placed under the senior ministers whom they are to assist, and they do not take part in any cabinet deliberations or meetings. Now we have distinguished between the Council of Ministers and the cabinet. So the Council of Ministers consider all the categories of ministers: cabinet minister, ministry of state, and deputy. And when the cabinet is a smaller group consisting of only the cabinet ministers, where day-to-day work of the government is done by the cabinet ministers, whereas the other ministers, like the ministers of state and deputy ministers, they really do not participate in the day-to-day meetings, and the cabinet ministers of the cabinet, they meet at a regular meeting at a regular basis, and the cabinet ministers attend the meetings of the cabinet in their own right, and ministers of state only attend when they are invited, and deputy ministers, these are junior ministers, they cannot attend the cabinet meetings except in extraordinary situations. Anyway, so this is the basic recap of different types of ministries. I'm doing this recap because it is often asked in your exam. Now, powers and functions of the Council of Ministers. The Council of Ministers have enormous and manifold responsibilities which cover administrative, legislative, and financial fields. In fact, all these powers are vested in the cabinet. Formulating the policy of the government. The cabinet formulates external and domestic policies of the government. It takes decisions on all major problems like defense and security needs, energy requirements, economic reforms, pollution control, improving relations with the superpowers as well as neighboring countries. These various things. Formation of new states, sending troops to trouble spots. That means the cabinet, and so on and so forth. Basically, what it means is that the cabinet ministers have a considerable freedom of action on all major matters, and they should necessarily, but on all major matters, they should necessarily consult the cabinet. Obviously, they cannot, cabinet ministers, without consulting the cabinet, they cannot take the decisions on major matters independently. Then comes administrative functions. The cabinet is essentially a policy framing body. Questions sometimes came that once or twice it has come that name the policy framing body of the parliament. The cabinet. When it has determined on a policy, the appropriate ministry, that means whether it is policy, if it is a policy on farmers or farming bill, the agriculture department. If it is on aircraft, some new rules have come on the aircraft, some increasing the fees of or decreasing the fees, whatever new policies, the aviation ministry. Uh, so when it has determined on a policy, the appropriate ministry carries it out. Each ministry or department must faithfully follow the directions of the cabinet. The president makes all major appointments with the aid and advice of the ministers. Such appointments relate to the appointment of the Attorney General of India, Governor of a state, the Chief Election Commissioner, the Election Commissioner, and others that have a high rank in the government. Now, third power and function of the Council of Ministers is that coordination in the functioning of various ministries. Normally, several departments are involved in the formation and implementation of a policy, be it India's missile program or implementation of Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, whatever. The cabinet acts as a coordinator. It coordinates, it is a link between various ministries. Then comes financial functions. The cabinet is responsible for whole of the expenditure, means spending of the government, and raising the revenue, raising the money also. A money bill can be introduced in the Lok Sabha only by a minister. The annual financial statement is known as budget. Budget is also another name for budget is annual financial statement. Occupies a peculiar position. Although it is presented to the parliament on the name of cabinet, its full proposals are neither circulated among the cabinet ministers nor debated by them. The proposals are disclosed in the cabinet orally on the day financial minister makes a budget speech in the parliament. Very interesting. See, it is orally said. Previously, previously the cabinet ministers have no idea. It is not circulated at all. So, a detailed taxation proposals are, however, shown to the Prime Minister before they are presented to the Parliament. The cabinet can examine the budget proposals after it has been presented in the Parliament and may also suggest suitable modifications, but not before that. Now, legislative functions. The cabinet has so much to do with legislation that it seems to have become its major function. It has become a very major function. Although the houses are summoned by the president, initiative in this matter is taken by the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs. Number 2, the cabinet prepares the president's special address to the parliament. The cabinet thus sets forth its legislative program as at the commencement of the first sessions of the Lok Sabha after each general election and at the commencement of the first sessions of the parliament each year. What does it mean? It means the cabinet prepares the president's address. The speech which the president will say, it is prepared by the cabinet. The cabinet thus sets forth its legislative program at the commencement of the first session of the Lok Sabha after general election at the commencement. So, through the speech, the plans and programs of the cabinet is said, and it has been prepared by the cabinet. The president only reads out the speech. Okay. The parliament has neither the time nor the necessary know-how of making laws. Initiative in legislation has almost completely gone to the cabinet. More than 95% of the bills are government bills prepared by the ministers. They are introduced, explained, and defended in the parliament by the ministers. Then comes, in the matter of issuing ordinance, we have learned about ordinance in the previous chapters. As in the matters, the president acts on the advice of the ministers. Everything the ministers will say, the president will act. The cabinet is instrumental in planning and moving an amendment to the constitution. Amendment means change in the law. So, the cabinet is instrumental in planning and moving. Diplomatic links with other nations. The cabinet decides the foreign policy of the nation. It directs how to negotiate agreements with the other countries of the world. the cabinet plays an important role in choosing our ambassadors and giving recognition to the regimes. Clear? It decides the foreign policies. It negotiates the agreements of the other countries. It chooses the ambassador, I mean the representatives who will go to various different countries. Proclamation of emergency. Now, the president cannot proclaim a state of emergency unless the Union Cabinet recommends him to do in writing that such a proclamation should be made. This article relates to a proclamation of emergency in this event of war or external aggression. External aggression is external attack, or an armed rebellion, that means a armed terrorist attack within the country. Similarly, such decisions as the imposition of precedence rules in a state are taken by the cabinet. Cabinet will take the decision. Immense growth in the powers of the cabinet. Some observers have regretted that the growth in the power of cabinet has reduced the power and the prestige of the parliament. It is according to some of the authors and observers. There are persons and organizations that may be a threat to the security of the country. Internationally, things are happening much faster than the world would have expected. A natural consequences of this has been an increase in the functions of the executive. Obviously, things and threats are changing so fast. If the executive is not given the ample power, it will not be able to protect the country. So, this power is necessary, extremely necessary for the safety of our country. Okay. Now, salient features of the cabinet system or parliamentary form of government. What are some important features? President is the constitutional head of a state. President is the constitutional head of the state. State means our here country. The real executive is the Council of Ministers. It is the cabinet which formulates policies of the government and directs their implementations. Second is leadership of the Prime Minister. The Council of Ministers functions under the leadership of the Prime Minister. He acts as a link between the cabinet and the president. His resignation, very important, means the resignation of the entire Council of Ministers. Once a question was once asked that what is the implication of the resignation of the Prime Minister? The implication is if the Prime Minister resigns, it results in the resignation of the entire Council of Ministers. Harmonious cooperation between the executive and legislative branches of government. The members of the executive are members of the legislative and take part in its deliberations. They answer questions and defend their policies from attack of the opposition. Being certain of the support of their party or the coalition partners, the ministers can have necessary laws passed by the parliament. Thus, the chief merit of the parliamentary form of government is harmony between executive and legislative. Harmony means cooperation. So, ministers of the executive, that means the ministers, members of the executive, ministers, are the members of the legislature, and they can take part in deliberation. They answer questions of the opposition. Being certain of the support of their party or coalition party partners, members can have necessarily passed laws by the parliament. So, the chief merit of the parliamentary government is that there is a harmony, that means friendship, cooperation between executive and the legislature. Collective responsibility. We will come to that again after a little short time. Collective responsibility and individual responsibility. Collective responsibility means the ministry as a whole functions on the basis of collective responsibility, which means once the cabinet has reached its decision, it is the duty of each minister to know it as his own. That means if the decision is right, the credit goes to everybody. If the decision is wrong, the discredit has to be taken by all the ministers. The minister who is unwilling to defend the policy of the government should resign. You have to say yes, yes, yes of whatever policy the government takes. If you have any problem, you can discuss it out. But if you are not willing to work or defend the government's policy, you are welcome to leave. Now comes ministerial responsibility. Now, ministerial responsibility is essential feature of what? Of parliamentary form of government. Now, two dimensions are there of the responsibility. One is the collective responsibility and one is individual responsibility. Question is often asked. Under Article 75(3), the Constitution, the Council of Ministers shall be collectively responsible to the House of the People. That is what the term ministerial responsibility actually means. The ministers are responsible to the Lok Sabha not as individuals alone but collectively also. Ministers of the cabinet swim and sink together. Whatever decision is taken, every minister has to stand by it without hesitation. A no confidence motion expresses a want of confidence in the government. It is generally moved by the leader of the opposition. On conclusion of the debate, the speaker puts the motion into vote. If the motion is passed, the ministry has to resign. Okay, so this is part of the collective responsibility. Now comes individual responsibility. What is this? Though the ministers are collectively responsible in the Lok Sabha, there shall be individual responsibility as head of state. Very, very important. The ministers hold office during the pleasure of the president. It implies that the ministers shall be liable to be dismissed by the president for their undesirable activities. A minister can be dismissed. However, in these matters, the president acts on the advice of ministry. So you will see that there are sometimes there are expansion of the ministry. There are changes in the ministry. Some ministers are removed from some department. Some ministers are new ministers come to some department in that same department, and the ministers, those who are removed, they become emotional. Must be some reasons. So this is how it is removed. It is the prime minister or advises the president tells them to resign. Usually because of something that the minister has done, the prime minister asks him to resign, which he readily does. Besides, every minister is obliged to answer the questions pertaining to his department. So this is individual. Whatever department you are heading or you are the head, you have to answer. Methods by which parliament ensures ministerial responsibility. That means the control over the parliament. Control of parliament over the executive. If certain control measures are not there, the executive or the council of ministers will become dictators, for the 6-year span. The council of ministers is responsible to the Lok Sabha. There are several methods by which the parliament ensures ministerial responsibility. To put ministers questions which should be properly answered. No minister can afford to take a question lightly, because sometimes even a simple inquiry may lead to an unexpected volume of criticism. The questions give MPs some measures of control over the executive. Second, moving an adjournment motion for discussing an important matter that has urgent consideration. Adjournment motion can be passed. Moving cut motions when the financial matters are under consideration. Moving censure motion against an individual minister or a group of ministers for their failures. Moving a no confidence motion. Such a motion is moved up by a minister or a leader of the opposition. If the motion is carried, it implies the loss of confidence and the government has to resign. It's an extreme move. It's an extreme step where and it has to be passed. We might be angry, the opposition might be angry about the ruling party, but on their whims and fancies, they cannot pass the no confidence motion. And they can pass, but if it is not passed in the parliament, it has no value. Anyway, so with this, we come to the end of this chapter, the Union Executive, Prime Minister, Union Cabinet Minister, Council of Ministers. Your work, as you all know, go through the chapter, go through my classes, and please solve the questions and answers. The more you solve, the more expert you become. So in the next class, we will start with the next chapter, the Union Judiciary. We will start with the Supreme Court. Thank you for today.